All right, so I got this Harbor Freight 2 horsepower dust collector. Definitely not my first Harbor Freight purchase, but the first one where I actually had to assemble something. So open it up, and all of the hardware, which is nicely organized now, was in just one little baggie. And so I go through the instructions, and they've got the setup instructions, and they're absolutely horrible. And so I sat down and I tried to figure out, basically using a little bit of trial and error and looking at this diagram, which, believe it or not, was actually a little bit helpful. And I think I made a decent little guide to what goes where. So let's start with the casters, because that's the easiest. So all of these little parts go to the casters. It's part number 5, 21, 9, and 38. You can see you've got a couple of screws, some lock washers, some nuts, and some washers. And when you assemble them, you assemble them with a washer on top, washer on bottom, a lock washer, and then the nut, right? So, I put one caster on, and that seemed to fit okay. So I didn't do the others yet, but I'm pretty sure that's where those go. So that's nice, because that took out a huge chunk of the mess right there. And then as far as some of the other parts go, let's talk about the motor and the motor mount. So I'm calling this the motor, this the motor mount. So you can see there's a spot up here that mates with this part of the motor. Takes 4 bolts from what I can tell. It's these 4 long ones right here, which are part number 28, that bolt M8 by 25. A washer on each side. Now, interestingly, this is part number 14, but those are also part number 14. Flat washer 8. They don't distinguish between the thick or the thin ones, so I'm kind of going out on a limb here saying, hey, the motor's heavy. These guys go on the motor. And then there are nuts to go with them. Now, if you're doing some math, you can see 4 and 6. I don't know why they're 6, but these are the number 36 nut M8, and I think those go on the motor to the mount. And it's funny, because if you look at part number 36 in the instruction, it says there's 6, and then I couldn't find on the diagram, other than the motor and the motor mount. Oh, it seems there's, okay, so there are a couple spots on the bag to, I guess, separator. I'll call this thing the separator. 2 of those nuts go there. So 4 go on the motor mount and 2 go on the bag to the separator connection. So that's these right here. Now these guys, again, that's the same number, part 14. This is also part 14, but they're different. I'm pretty sure that these, let me back up a little bit. These go with these bolts and these lock washers. And now that I think about it, you might be using some of those lock washers with the motor mount. Ultimately, this part of the directions is helpful if you can set up something like this, right, where you lay everything out. So these bolts, these also go to the motor mount. These are what mount the motor mount to the base. So you can see they're a little bit shorter, and that's because they go in right here. So there are 4 of them right there, and you can probably tell a little bit on the base here. These are actually, there are some nuts welded to the back. So you don't need a nut there, you just need a washer and a lock washer. And I've heard that some people don't get the lock washers. I think you'll probably be fine without them. I fortunately did get them, so that's a nice little bonus. Now these also go to what I call the bars. I don't know what these are actually called, but all these little bars take the shorter bolt M8 by 16, that's part number 16, washers, and they're called spring washers in the instructions, but Just like the rest of the base, a lot of these are pre-threaded. So you got nuts under here. You don't need a nut to connect those. They just screw right in. And again, kind of like the motor mount, you got the bolt going through, spring washer, lock washer, whatever you want to call it, and then the actual washer. And then up here, you'll use the same bolt, but you're going to need a nut and another washer on the other side. And then finally, I saw these and I was like, what the heck are these for here? Well, you got 6 of these bolts with kind of the built-in washer, and you've got 6, I only see 5. That's a problem. One of them rolled somewhere, but I'm pretty sure that they go on this gasket type thing right here. And so you can see I called these part number 18 and part number 22, which on the instructions are nut M6 and bolt M6 by 20. Again, 18 and 22. And let's see if we can find on the sheet. Yeah, you've got 18 and you've got 22 up here. So that's where those go. So anyway, I'll kind of come up here a little bit. I'll go through and I'll zoom again. And hopefully you guys can pause and separate out your nuts, bolts, all your hardware in a similar way, label them. And if you got this coupled with that picture, you should be about 95% there. So I hope you have fun. We'll see how this thing turns out. I'll probably put it all on the base for a little bit until I can figure out exactly where I want to put this thing, because I think what I'll ultimately want to do is mount it to the wall, have a separator probably inside, and have it vent outside. That way I'm getting no dust, no sawdust or anything like that inside. Everything just goes outside. So we'll see when that happens.